Hi, I'm Anna Yudin. I'm a fiction author as well as a doctor of clinical psychology, and today I want to talk about the debate on whether or not BookTok has ruined literature. So I made a video a few months ago titled, "Can we just let women read in peace?" And in that video, somebody so lovely left me the most respectful comment, as people do on the internet, letting me know that I didn't interact with one of the key pieces of this debate, which is that BookTok is ruining literature because books these days are so terrible. And you're right, anonymous user, I didn't interact with that because I wasn't really aware of that. So let me respond to your comment now.
Does anybody on this godforsaken app read a single book that isn't just straight up? It's not spice, it's not a romantic novel, it's
It seems that certain people think that the books recommended on BookTok are shallow and unliterary and mostly just smut, and that this has ruined the field of literature. And I find myself going a little bit back and forth on this topic. As an author, as a reader, as a BookToker myself, I feel torn in a lot of different directions. So in this video, I'm just going to let the two parts of my brain kind of battle it out, and you guys can let me know which one you agree more with in the comments. So let's get into it. Hi, I'm the Anna that disagrees with this statement, so let me stop you right there. BookTok repopularized reading. I'm sure more people are reading literary fiction now than they would have been if there wasn't this movement to repopularize reading. Even though, yes, I think there are a lot more people reading genre fiction or commercial fiction or poorly written fiction, that's not BookTok's fault. People will always be drawn towards what they like, and a lot of people prefer commercial fiction. Those people would have never sought out reading in the first place if it weren't for repopularizing reading. And they were probably never going to look for literary fiction. Hey, so I'm the Anna that disagrees with you a little bit. So my issue is not that people are reading non-literary books. I think as long as people are reading something, that's fantastic for their emotional and intellectual health. The only thing I kind of take issue with is when people are praising poorly written books and sometimes even putting down literary fiction because it's not all about plot and character. So let me give you an example of what I mean. This is from The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, which, by the way, might be the best book I've ever read in my life. Definitely the best book of 2024 so far. So this person gave it a 2-star review and said, "This was actually a really good story, with especially the last 100 pages being filled with intrigue and suspense. However, there is just so much superfluous description. It's like when in school you had to bulk up the word count in an essay, so you just threw in a bunch of adjectives. I became quite adept at scanning through description to reach plot points. However, that's not the way I like to read a book. And don't get me wrong, I love a bit of scene setting. I love to know in detail what everyone is wearing and thinking and what the room they're in looks like, etc. But this description was so uninteresting and flabby in a book that could have been mega given its plot. Maggie, you have failed the assignment." Well, I'm pretty sure she's a best-selling author, but okay, I guess she failed the assignment. So what irks me about this review is that it makes it seem like all of fiction is about plot and intrigue, and that is not what it should only be about. This book was written so beautifully. It had so many words that I have to look up. My God, I cannot remember ever needing to look up this many words in a book because the vocabulary was so advanced. It was perfect for the situation. It was like she knew how to call a specific section of a Roman column. She knew how to call a specific room in an Italian palazzo. And so I do think that this review is an example of what's wrong with people only reading for plot and character these days, because we're forgetting that fiction is also about how beautifully you can write something. Let me read you another review. You have two choices: to read the Wikipedia page of Lucrezia de Medici, Duchess of Ferrara, or read this over-described, over-elaborated, over-embellished book of 450 pages about an uninteresting character and the rumor about the manner of her death, only to reach the same conclusion. I find myself feeling so protective over literary authors who receive reviews like this. Literary fiction is not just about what happens plot-wise. Every sentence in literary fiction is carefully crafted to say something in a novel and beautiful way, using allegorical language, unique structure, repetition, vocabulary that perfectly fits the situation. To me, it shows that the author is a clever wordsmith who can bring something fresh, surprising, or just plain beautiful to their readers. And it's also more about universally human themes. Like I can't relate to the protagonist from The Housemaid who starts to suspect that something sinister is at play with a couple whose house she's looking after. But I can relate to the themes of lost childhood, disempowerment, and entrapment that are found in The Marriage Portrait. With literary fiction, it's a lot more about the journey, not the destination. Every sentence, every word is there to savor, not to just skim to get to the plot. To prove my point about how beautiful this book is, I'm just going to pick a random page in the book and just show you what I've highlighted in it. This is The Marriage Portrait, picking a page. Here we go. It is the middle of the night, deep in the sunless hours, and the covered carriage waits just inside the bolted gates of the palazzo under the arch. In her lap there is a rosary, a nosegay, and a woolen shawl with a slippery fringe. The seat beneath her is padded with a velvet cushion, studded with gold buttons. Perhaps dawn is about to break. The starlings outside in the piazza are beginning their percussive chatter. A tumbling troop came leaping into the salon. The air here in this carriage under the archway is dank and cool. I love that it transports you to this place. I love that it uses words that are just a little bit more elevated than they could be. She could have said a band came leaping into the salon, but she didn't say that. She said a tumbling troop came into the salon. It sounds much more old-timey, and it's set in old times. Her description of the sounds made by the starlings as percussive chatter was so beautiful. When you think about percussive music, you hear something, so you know exactly what she's talking about. Basically, what I'm trying to say is literary literature is so beautiful. There's so much that goes into it, that when I see people giving bad reviews to it because it's not all about plot and character, it does make me feel a little bit like we've killed literature by making it all about what the people want. Okay, so I actually agree with you on most of what you just said. I do think it sucks when an author pours their heart out into a work of fiction and a reader with limited understanding of literature goes bashing them. But the thing is, it's not really up to you to decide what is and isn't objectively well or poorly written fiction. As you yourself know and you yourself have said, reading is extremely subjective. It's informed by your own personal lens, your triggers, your biases, your experiences. So how can anyone really say what is objectively poorly written? So that's a fair point. And you're right, I actually don't believe that writing can be interpreted in a fully objective way. Every single one of us looks for something different in a book. Some of us like more literary fiction, others like just a fun, simple, entertaining read. When I say something is objectively poorly written, maybe what I'm actually trying to say is that we culturally have certain norms for what's considered good writing. For instance, showing versus telling, not using the same sentence structure over and over, not overusing the same words. So while there is a lot of subjectivity between readers, one reader might say, I really love that you chose to do this with the storyline, and a different reader might say the exact opposite. I think where the objective part of reading comes along is where readers kind of reach a consensus. If you have hundreds of reviews from readers saying, I thought this specific thing was poorly done about the writing, then that's kind of what I mean by something being objectively poorly written. Okay, so here's the thing though. Even the rules are made to be broken, no? Take, for example, Ernest Hemingway. He structures almost all his sentences as blank and blank. And he's considered one of the greats. I have a Farewell to Arms right here. Let me just pull out a random page and show you what I mean. In the late summer of that year, we lived in a house in a village that looked across the river and the plain to the mountains. The trunks of the trees, too, were dusty, and the leaves fell early that year, and we saw the troops marching along the road and the dust rising in leaves. There was fighting in the mountains, and at night we could see the flashes from the artillery. So you see, there's like a lot of repetition in his sentence structure, and a lot of it is just blank happened and blank happened. Or what about Practical Magic? It's one of your favorite novels, and it does a lot of showing rather than telling, and it switches point of view with random characters that aren't integral to the story, and you still love that book. So isn't it true that even culture-bound norms of what's considered good writing can be subjective? That someone can break the norms of writing and create a masterpiece? Yeah, you can absolutely break the rules and get away with it if you do it well. It's so hard to put in words what I mean by amateurish writing, but you can just feel it. Amateurish writing just feels amateurish. Now that I'm really stopping to think about what is amateurish writing, how would you define it? I feel like it comes down to two things: lack of creativity and lack of effort. So starting with creativity, writing I feel like has to bring something fresh and unique, at least in terms of its line editing, if not in terms of everything about the book. You can just tell when something is amateurish, for instance, because it's something overdone, like it sent a shiver down her spine. Or, let's say that somebody uses the expression, the coconut looked like a baby's head. You almost can't even put your finger on it, but you can just get this feeling that the author wasn't original, didn't quite land. That's one thing for me is creativity. The second is effort. And for me personally, I get annoyed when I'm reading a book that's too simple. It feels like it could have been written by a third grader, like The Housemaid. I want to feel like the author put an effort into the work of art. And when I don't feel that way, I get the sense that it was just lazy writing. So giving the same example as before, instead of saying the coconut looks like a baby's head, if the author takes just a moment longer and puts in the effort to think of something better, thereby using their creativity, then it doesn't feel so amateurish. Then it goes from coconut looked like a baby's head, maybe to she pried the coconut from his hands, running her fingers along the rough wisps of its shell. Doesn't that sound so much better? All because the author took a little bit of extra time to put in effort and creativity. Yeah, it does sound better. I think we can both agree that books which took creativity and effort to write are the closest thing to objectively well written as we'll ever get to. But I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said that it annoys you when you hear people who don't like literary fiction writing bad reviews for literary fiction. Don't you think that's a bit elitist of you? Don't they deserve to share their thoughts about a book like anyone else? No, of course they do. I think reviews are valuable. What bothers me is when people leave reviews on any book, even books that I disliked, that seems devoid of self-reflection. I think saying that somebody failed the assignment just because it wasn't for you is arrogant. And it especially annoys me when I can tell that the author in question put in a lot of effort and creativity into that book, and now people are shitting on it as if their subjective opinion is objective truth. Would you ever say that people don't have a right to leave movie reviews unless they're well versed in film analysis? Of course not. You believe you have a right and other people have a right to give their subjective opinion on a movie, despite not having a background in film. And you love watching light, fun movies that might be considered objectively bad by artistic standards. Why is it any different with literature? Okay, you got me. I have no counter-argument to that. But I will say this. Even in this context, I think it would be pompous of someone with no understanding of film to leave bashing reviews of a film that's clearly created to be artistic. We have to acknowledge when we're basing our evaluation on vibes rather than art. Let me give you an example. I didn't like the movie The Machinist. I thought it was depressing as fuck, and I hope to never see it again. And I wouldn't recommend it to people. I wouldn't talk about how good it is. But would I leave a review saying it was a bad movie? No, because I can tell it was a thoughtfully created work of art, and it had a lot of artistic merit and symbolism. Let me give you a different example. I don't like a lot of modern art. I find it visually unappealing. To me, when I look at visual arts, what I want to see is mainly just, is it pretty? But I would never say that a modern piece of art is bad because I realize I'm not an art critic and I don't understand what exactly it is that I'm critiquing. It's all subjective with me. I do think that some of the people on BookTok positioning themselves as sources of authority on what is good literature could be a little bit gentler and humbler in their approach and acknowledge that they're coming at this from a purely vibes perspective as a book lover, but not as a book critic. I can agree with that. So it sounds like what you're saying is that people can read whatever they like and people are entitled to speak their mind when they dislike a piece of literature. But we could all use a little bit more humility when talking about art. Yes, exactly. And also, I think that authors who are more creative and intentional about their writing should get some credit for that. I imagine it sucks to spend your life honing a gorgeous piece of literature like Maggie O'Farrell has, and then have people rate you as lower than Colleen Hoover books. I imagine that would really suck. So that was me sort of debating with the two parts of my brain. Let me know what you thought about this because, as you can probably tell, I haven't really made up my mind. I'm still feeling a little bit torn on the subject, so I'd love to hear what others think about the subject.